Permission to record?
That's my safe word.
Binkus.
Turkey.
Hello everyone, welcome to X Chapter Channel. This week I have a very special guest, a longtime friend of mine, and I will let him introduce himself.
Well, hey, mysterious podcaster guy. So yeah, I'm Jay. I've known you since 2002 during your first stint in Japan, when we were both on the JET program as ALTs, working in a lovely town in Yamanashi.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I've been here in Japan ever since. I moved to Tokyo in 2005 and have been in the recruitment and talent industry since 2007.
Okay. And the funny thing about how Japan works is, despite the fact that you've been here longer than I have, because you didn't leave like I did. I went back to the States for 3 years for graduate school. But the fact that I arrived in Japan a week before you did means I'm forever your senpai.
Senpai, I told you never to talk about this.
Yep. So
yeah, that's correct.
you have three years minus a week seniority over me in terms of amount of time, but I'm still senpai, which is the quirk of Japanese culture.
Should I call you senpai during the entire call here?
Please don't.
Whenever you say senpai.
Yeah, I've created a monster. I was just trying to input a little bit of interesting cultural background for our viewers abroad.
I think I've told you this, but having lived here now for, almost half my adult life, or almost half my life, not just the adult life, I sometimes lack the context. I forget things like that. So, that makes complete sense to me. It's just natural. Like, yeah, you're my senpai.
Yeah.
Because you were here a week before I was here. But yeah, I wouldn't think of the fact that that's not normal without the context of having lived in Japan for X number of years.
That happens quite a bit too. You just become used to certain concepts that you forget that that's not normal everywhere else.
Well, I remember when we first, our first couple of years, and we would have a guest come, and you'd go around and you'd laugh at all the things that are so different about Japan from back home.
Mm-hmm.
And now, when somebody comes to visit or they're in Japan for the first time, they're like, why is that? Why is what? It's just what people do. So I think I've become kind of assimilated into the culture to a certain degree.
That's one of the beauties of having guests, though, is that it's one of those windows to remind you of what you've forgotten. I like having guests because it really lets me see Japan kind of fresh again, in a way. I had this discussion with someone actually on another video that I did a couple weeks ago of how Japan has changed me, and I found that to be a difficult question to answer just from the standpoint that, having your entire adult life anywhere is going to change you in ways, so it's really hard to make a comparison. Like, if I'd worked in America for a number of years and then come to Japan, I might have been better prepared to answer that question. But as it is, it's hard to parse what is, like, how adult life has changed me versus how living in Japan has changed me. Do you get a similar feeling, or?
Well, you at least went back for the 3-year stint. For me, having been here the entire time, I tend to view things back home in the States kind of with now, not an outsider's view, but I guess it is, but it's a very strange, kind of internal conflict because, I don't think of myself as Japanese. And obviously, my family is, but maybe that's part of it. There's always that contrast. Think of home, well, where I live and where I plan to live for a long time is here, but for the States, there's always that sort of distance and kind of thought I could go back sometimes, but to be honest, I'd be more lost with the way people interact and work and social customs in the States than here, I think.
Yeah, having moved back when I did, it was interesting that only 3 years away, I was already really disconnected. I mean, I didn't know what was going on in popular music. I didn't know what people were talking about on the radio in the morning, and I was, it
The
was,
radio.
yeah, right. It was still radio back then. Didn't even have a smartphone at that point, but that's 2005 to 2008 for context. But it was, I think one thing we end up suffering from when we live abroad is we feel like we're still connected to the States through Facebook and the news we consume or whatever, but we really aren't. We don't know what's going on in the day to day. I want to ask you, based on what you said, is at what point do you think Japan ceased to be, I'm living in a foreign country, and became like, this is just my home where I live?
I get in trouble when I use the word home when I'm talking to like family or friends, and then they get confused as to which home I'm talking to, and I specifically mean like my family back in the U.S. I'll say, or when I'm back in the U.S. for a visit, and I say, oh, I'm going to be home, and I'm going home in 3 weeks. What do you mean you're going home? You are home. I say, no. Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
When did that start? I'm trying to remember, because I remember there was a specific conversation I had probably with my wife, and just about the way I used language. And I said, I would be home soon, but I was referring to Japan.
What happens though if a Japanese person asks you in Japanese, where are you from? What do you say?
Well, I like to get just for shock value, I always say Tokyo,
Mm-hmm.
because they're usually, they're not expecting, for better or for worse. I mean, in people in Japan, they don't expect that people who don't have Japanese features are, long-term residents.
Yeah.
They're not asking me thinking that I've been here for close to 20 years. They're expecting me to say, oh, I'm visiting and I'm from whatever country. Yeah, that's interesting. And the way they ask, and you probably have experienced this as well. They don't say, where are you from?
どこの国ですか?
Yeah, 国はどちらですか? Like what country are you from?
Yeah. You mentioned that we first arrive in Japan and we're in Shinjuku and it's crazy modern, and the epitome of Japan is high technology nation, and yet we move out to the countryside and see that it's kind of a different world out there. For you, like, how have you, do you miss living in the countryside? Did you just totally adjust to Tokyo, or how would you compare the lifestyle in both places?
I mean, first of all, the convenience of where I live right now is one of the most attractive parts of it, right? I am lucky enough to live in a house in relatively central Tokyo, and I live next to a fairly big green park with trees and some running water and things like that. But by no means does it, by no means is it green or quiet. For a residential part of the biggest city in the world, sure, yeah, it's quiet. But it's not anything like where we grew up. I'm saying now with the COVID-19 situation going on, I mean, there's a downside to that where it's quite difficult to socially isolate. There was a picture in the Japan Times of, one of my local shopping arcades that was just, it's wall-to-wall people. And everyone has a mask on, but you can't get away from that. No matter what time of day, if I go outside, I'm probably going to see somebody within, walking 100 meters out my door. Yeah, the convenience of living in the center of Tokyo, being able to go into work. Honestly, right now, if I didn't, with the COVID-19, I wouldn't have, if my office was open and I wasn't able to telework, I could walk/run/bike into the office without too much trouble. And Tokyo is a weird city in that, it's the biggest city in the world, but it feels like a bunch of disconnected bubbles of, pockets and neighborhoods and but even more so than like say Fujiyoshida, where we lived before. It's like this is a commercial district. This is a residential district. This is where companies are, and some people live there. But this is where people go for entertainment. There's a flavor to each particular kind of neighborhood. Whereas, in a small town, it's just everything's mixed together, and there's, kind of, there's a factory here and a school here, and
yeah. My feeling for Tokyo changed a lot when I ran Tokyo Marathon, because that was when I finally actually had an idea about how the different parts of the city, or at least the most famous parts, connect to each other via the roads and because when you go to Tokyo and you ride the amazing train and metro system, it's like you're leaving Shinjuku Island and then you arrive in Tokyo Island or Shinagawa Island, and you pop up in Asakusa or wherever, and you don't really get the sense of the city. I wanted to ask, with the way Japan is handling COVID-19 and how life has almost certainly changed for you, how are you holding up?
I think I talked before about the convenience of living where I do, but I'm very lucky. We live in a house. If I think back to the previous apartment that I lived in, which, there are definitely families who live in that size of an apartment, we would have been right on top of each other, and probably, so 4 people in a pretty tight space would have been quite tough. I mean, we're not living in the biggest house in the world, but for Tokyo, it's a decent sized house, and we have the ability to have a little bit of space, even though we're all socially distancing. I'm also lucky in the sense that my company allows me to work remotely, and so we moved to full telework relatively early, or at least we have the infrastructure to do that. So I work for a company of about somewhere between 350 to 400 people, and we were able to pretty quickly shift to remote working. I don't see a lot of disciplined social distancing. Honestly, we're only going out right now we go shopping for food, and we, take walks or go for exercise in the park, or just for a walk around the neighborhood. I've got 2 young boys who I need to keep somewhat entertained and healthy, but the response is quite different amongst expats versus amongst Japanese. And even my wife was out the other day for a walk, and she ran into a neighbor, a friend of our family's who, was walking their dog, and they have a daughter. They have 2 kids that are the same age as my kids, and so the other mother was like, "Jishuku shitemasu ka?" And then are you refraining from going out? Are you distancing? And my wife was like, yeah, we are. And she's like, oh, really? Yeah, well, we're trying, but we still have our daughter play with her friends and this and that. That's pretty much the kind of attitude I've seen from a lot of my Japanese friends and acquaintances. Mm-hmm. I'm not pointing fingers, but I think part of it might have to be with the way that the news is communicated here. Mm-hmm. Or the message from the government has been to avoid the 3 kind of crowded places, but it hasn't really been as strong about flattening the curve or whatever. Also, because a lot of the stores have reduced their hours, which I understand makes sense. So you want to keep your workforce safe, mm-hmm. And that's one way to do that. But it certainly means that, it seems that the grocery store is more crowded throughout the day because before it would be open till midnight or till 2 a.m. and now it's closing at 7 or 8 p.m. Well, people still need to buy the same amount of food. So that's quite a challenge.
Well, Jay, thanks for joining me for this interview. It's now more than ever, it's good to be in touch with people, and I hope we can continue to keep touch as things roll forward with this horrible COVID situation going on. But I hope that you stay safe and stay well, and your family back home and at home are both healthy and well from here on in. And thank you for doing this.
No worries, dude. Thanks so much. It's good to have a chance to have our first ever recorded Skype call. I'm sure it'll be amazing.
Yeah, it's feeling more like a podcast than a vlog, to be honest. I think that's how it's going to come across. But those be the times.
All right, we'll talk to you later, man.
Yep. Have a good one.